Coffee break chat time. Yay.
Yay! I have a drink this time. I
Oh,
have.
nice. I have a little bit of mine left. Um, so we don't have a ton of time. Like we always cram these in like right before our certification program call.
Yeah.
So we're gonna have to be concise today, Heather.
We'll do our
Um,
best.
do our best. We were chatting a little bit today, and I don't even remember how she came up, but Barbara Coloroso, her
Yeah.
work, The Bully, the Bullied, and the Bystander, and she
Yeah.
apparently wrote a whole book about genocide, which I didn't know.
She did. Yeah.
Anyway, we're not talking about genocide in particular. We're talking about bullies because a little bit jumping off of what we talked about last week with authoritarian leaders and things like that. But we are having our second webinar coming up this Thursday, which is super exciting. I'm very excited about that. But it's talking about a grounded guide. So how, Heather, is a grounded guide not a bully, not bullied, and not a bystander?
Yeah.
Um,
You told me I had to be
unpack that
concise.
now in 10 minutes.
Yeah. You asked such a big question and then tell me I'm supposed to be concise.
I know, I'm terrible for that.
Yeah, so where it started, we were talking about Barbara Coloroso's book, which I read like over 15 years ago.
Mhm.
It's called Extraordinary Evil, and she makes a link. She's a parenting expert, and she makes a childhood development expert. She
Right.
makes a link between the childhood bully and then the person, the genocidaire, I think it is, the name is for a person who
Commits
creates
genocide.
genocide or yeah.
Yeah.
And we were talking about how this is kind of playing out, not that genocide yet, but how this is playing out in political systems where we end up electing people who are essentially bullies. And how we want, when we're talking about grounded guides, we're talking about essentially, in many ways, the opposite of that. Somebody who has, because the childhood bully, or the person who's either bullied or the bullier in their childhood, in the playground, ends up, or they're doing that out of a deep woundedness that you carry,
Yeah.
and all of us have some of that woundedness that plays out some way in our adulthood. Like, so none of us is above this. But we don't all become bullies because some of us are intentional about witnessing that in ourselves. Like, I was wounded. Like, I faced some bullying in my childhood. I still do now as an adult occasionally. And there's a way of alchemizing that, transforming it, healing it in us so that we don't play it out in our relationships, in our leadership styles. And this is what we want to talk about with being a grounded guide. It's like, what are the ways that we can transform the woundedness in us so that it doesn't become malignant. And this is, we were talking about malignant narcissism is a bit of a product of this, of people who have a deep woundedness, an attachment wound or something, who create these sort of ways of controlling whatever they can control so that they feel somehow more safe inside. And we go back to our core needs triad, the safety, belonging, identity. I mean, we'll be talking about that more in future calls, but it's like, yeah, how do we help people get to the core of their healthy self or potentially healthy self so that they don't end up wounding people throughout their lives because of that within them.
Mhm. Yeah, what's coming up for me is this curiosity about why we would choose a bully to be in charge. Because it seems kind of counterintuitive, counterlogical somehow. Like, why would you choose someone who is hurting you to run the show? And I mean, I know the answer to this because it's related to the core needs triad, of course, of wanting to belong and wanting to feel safe. And that sense that if I am close to the bully, and this is the bystander effect, right?
Yeah.
If I am close to the bully, then I will not be bullied.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah. So, like,
If I make myself valuable to that bully,
right,
especially. Yeah.
right. So maybe that's another thing we want to accomplish with the whole idea of a grounded guide is that you were less inclined to attempt to find your own safety and grounding by aligning yourself with people who are maybe outside of your value system too,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I don't know if that's bringing anything up for you, but that's sort of what's
Yeah. Well, and
popping for
that's
me a
what
bit.
one of the things we talk about in this whole idea of being a grounded guide is that you have to ground yourself in relationships, in radical friendships, in community, in places where your your essential self can be well held. And that's where we go back to the practice of holding space so that it's not doesn't become fractured and you don't end up aligning yourself with the wrong kinds of people. But that takes like intentional work. It takes like grounding ourselves in how do I grow those friendships that help me? It's almost like the friendships and the relationships and the community work like an antidote or a when I think of the pandemic and we have to get vaccinated against the pandemic coming, like that's what we're doing by growing friendships and relationships and finding ways to ground ourselves. I was writing this weekend about tyranny and truth telling, and what
Mm-hmm.
I did was go visit the ancient trees on this island because that's a form of relationship too. It's like if I
Mm.
can stand with these trees, if I can root myself in this earth, I can be more grounded to tell the truth and to stand up to the bullies. And so that's a lot of what our work is in Leadership for Liminal Spaces is how do we give you the resources that will ground you at, create a rooted system that allows you to withstand and have an antidote against the kind of bullying that we keep witnessing in our political systems.
And it's not about like eliminating that sense of fear or even that self-protective mechanism in us. Like we're not proposing to override that by you coming through our
No,
program. I
no, we
think
can't.
we really want to just build that capacity
Yeah,
to be able to withstand, right? So that you feel more like a tree that can bend in the wind and not break.
yeah,
Someone that is rooted in a strong sense of self and purpose and value, so that you're not inclined to just topple at the first sign of trouble,
yeah.
which doesn't undermine how scary that trouble can feel. Because,
No,
yeah, I think
no.
we are all feeling still. I don't remember the last time I didn't feel activated by the state of the world.
Well, I think it's really important to say that we are never talking about perfectionism. Like
No,
perfectionism
never.
is actually one of the tools of the patriarchy and the capitalist colonial system. We're not
Mm-hmm.
talking about that. We're not talking
No.
about healing all our wounds so we can withstand this. We're talking about networking ourselves with other people, creating good mycelial networks so that we're rooted, so that like I might be a wounded tree, but you've got me because our roots are intertwined and there's
Yeah.
and so one of the ways that trees like they protect each other by actually sending if there's a danger, if there's some kind of something that's killing trees in the forest,
Mm-hmm.
the mother tree is going to send through the root system, through the mycelial layer, whatever helps protect that tree. And I'm not a
Mm-hmm.
scientist, so I'm not using all the right language. But that's, when I am wounded, when I'm having, and you and I have that in our relationship, when I'm being potentially triggered by an old trauma, when I've got stuff going on, you're
Mm-hmm.
sending me stuff through the network that's helping me stay strong. And so we're not talking about being individually strong here. We're talking about creating grounded networks where we're holding each other up, holding space for the collective. And that's much more important than that I fix all my individual weaknesses.
Absolutely. And I think like it's one of those things that I think a lot of people think, oh, that sounds so good in theory, but I don't know if I trust other people to do that. You know what I mean? So that's the other thing
Yeah.
we want to help build is build your capacity to rely on that network,
Yeah.
um, by being a good person in that network, I think
Yeah.
is where it
Yeah.
starts, right? Like
Yeah.
if you can start from a place of, okay, I can be a grounded guide, you are more likely to be able to trust other people to do the same for
Yeah.
you. And it's tricky. It's not easy, and you're never going to get it right in the first shot.
Yeah. No, and that we one of the words we use a lot is discernment. And
Yeah.
I've discovered over the years of teaching workshops, I almost always have to define discernment, especially in places where I teach in the Netherlands. There's
Yeah.
no equivalent Dutch word for it, so we always have to unravel what it means to be discerning. And discernment is really about developing the wisdom to make wise choices
Hmm.
and our discernment in our relationships. Like all of us have at some point aligned ourselves with a person who ended up hurting us. Like that's just
Hmm.
like that's kind of in the testing ground of how do I become a discerning, mature person who isn't sucked into situations or, whatever relationships, communities that are going to end up harming me. We all end up hurt at some point, and that's
Yeah.
part of our learning process. So yeah, I think that's one of the things that we want to talk about is like how do we learn? How do we develop the maturity that we make valuable rooted friendships and have the discernment, accountability built into it that we, even when the person does wound us, we can recover and we can either, work on repair in that
Hmm.
situation or find ways of stepping outside of the situation if it continuously wounds us. So
For
I know we're
sure.
kind of going in a lot of different directions and
As
we
we
should
do.
probably wrap
But
this up
I
because we
know, but
have
I was
much
just
more to
thinking, like, we
say.
don't just talk about that. We also try to demonstrate it and to provide spaces where it can happen. Like most
Yeah,
of our programs, that's what we do. Like, here's a container with a bunch of people you've never met before, and we're
yeah,
going to show you how to be in good community with them and how to work through some of that stuff and how to have good social contracts and agreements
yeah.
and be able
And
to.
how to fuck up now and then repair it.
Yes,
Like
100%, 100%. And I mean, we have had so many opportunities to do
yeah,
that,
exactly.
even just between you and I and between some of the people we've had on our team, and just we have fumbled a
Yeah,
lot and we've also learned a lot through that. And I think, at least I hope, the relationships that we have developed through that are just so much richer and stronger, and hold that network a lot tighter in
yeah,
that in our little forest, if we want
yeah.
to go with that metaphor more.
We'll
But
keep
yeah, okay, we'll stop rabbit trailing. I think coffee breaks over.
I think so. Time to wrap it up. But
Time to
just to
wrap it up.
remind you, Center for Holding Space slash .com/leadership for liminal spaces. Come join us. We've
Yeah.
done the first webinar. We're about to do the second one this week, and we have these amazing study group after the
Yes,
webinar,
come to
which
the
we've
study
been
groups, they're
having such
so good.
beautiful, meaningful conversations, sometimes emotional conversations,
Yeah.
and we look forward to more people joining us.
Yeah, and you can buy the first webinar if weren't able to come. It's available for purchase,
Yeah,
so you can do that
yeah.
too. Okay, we'll see you this Thursday, one
February
o'clock
27th.
Central, 11 p.m. Pacific, 1900 GMT
11
for
a.m. Pacific.
right, 11 a.m. The time changes
Yeah,
are gonna kill us one day, I
I'm not going to
swear.
be doing it at night.
No, definitely not. Okay, Thursday, we'll see you all there.